continue with the state's case, please call the next witness, Mr. Truman.
Your Honor, the state calls Glenda Eply.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may have a seat right there, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Truman.
Great. Can you scoot as close as...
Scoot up?
Or bend that microphone down.
Okay. Will that work?
That will.
Maybe a little more. Bend it down a little more, please.
Okay.
Okay, now, Mr. Truman.
Thank you, Your Honor. You are Glenda Eply.
Yes, sir.
Are you currently employed?
No, I'm retired now.
From what profession are you retired?
I was a registered nurse for a number of years.
Could you tell us your background, your education in nursing?
Yes, sir. I graduated from Bluefield State College in 1983, started working in the fall of '83 at Raleigh General Hospital, and stayed there until 2008. Then in 2008, I went to Princeton Community. I stayed employed there until 2016 and retired the first time. And then worked another 5 years until 2023 at Princeton Community as needed personnel.
And at some point, did you go to work at hospice?
Yes, in 2008, the hospice opened around that time, I think a year before maybe, and I started working as an as-needed person, a staff member there then. And I stayed there until 2013, I think, 13 or 16.
19, maybe?
What is it, 19? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Tell us a little bit about, just a brief overview of hospice philosophy. What do you do at hospice?
Hospice is set up to provide holistic care for a patient, meaning not only do we look at the physical care of the patient, but we look at the mental care, the social care, and the spiritual care of the patient and his family or her family. So it is, it's a palliative care, which means we're not trying to cure anything or heal anybody. We're trying to make you comfortable and live a good life until it's the end of life.
Your Honor, I'd like this marked as State 7, please, for identification.
Very well.
Separately, hospice is a medical facility, is it not?
Yes, it's a medical facility, but it also has a home side component, meaning we have staff that service the patients in their own home. And at Bowers House, we have a 12-patient inpatient facility.
Do you keep records of what transpires, like normal
Yes.
medical records?
Yes, they're electronic medical records.
They're what?
Electronic medical records.
Okay. Could I approach you?
Yes.
Thank you. Handy what's been marked for identification is States number 7, if you could review that, please.
Okay. Okay.
In general, the documents you're looking at are, what do they consist of?
These would be nursing notes that were put into the electronic system.
How do they get into the system?
The time that the nurse goes into the room, is documented, and when they come out, it's documented. And then their nursing note has a time on it. It hopefully is the time that they were in the room, but sometimes you can have late entries if you're particularly busy or whatever. But they're all stamped, time stamped.
Is that a requirement of the job that you keep nursing notes?
Yes.
Do you recall being on duty February the 10th, 2019?
Yes, sir.
What's a normal hospice nurse shift?
Well, we have 2 shifts. They're 12-hour shifts from 7A to 7P and 7P to 7A.
And on the 10th of February 2019, which shift were you working?
I was working the evening shift, 7P to 7A.
Do you recall receiving a patient at Bowers House on that night?
I was assigned a patient, yes.
Michael Cochran?
Yes. He had arrived while we were in report. From about 7 to 8 o'clock, there's a shift, during the shift change, the day shift will report off to the night shift. And so we were in report. Another nurse actually got Mr. Cochran in and did release his release to the ambulance company that brought him. And then at 8 o'clock, I made my first entry into the room.
And when you say there was a report that the day shift was bringing you up information on patients who were there, is that what you mean?
Yeah, in report, I was told that we were going to get a transfer from Charleston Area Medical Center. The patient was a younger man, I forget the age, and what I was told was he had fallen at home, had a head injury, and was not able to be treated, and there was nothing else they could do, and he was coming to hospice to pass away.
From the review of the chart, what time did Mr. Cochran arrive at Bowers?
From the note's at 7:45, so I would assume that he came in between 7:30 and 7:45.
And you had said earlier in your testimony that you were assigned to Mr. Cochran?
Yes.
Was there anybody else assigned with him along with you?
No.
So you were the primary nurse that,
Yes.
that provided. Mm-hmm. In summary fashion, what did you do for Mr. Cochran?
What did we do?
Yes.
Primarily, our goal that evening was to get Mr. Cochran comfortable. When he arrived, he was moaning, moving his feet around, appeared to be in pain or discomfort. And our goal was to get him comfortable, and that's what we did. That was the focus of the whole plan. And we were trying to get him settled in and comfortable.
He appeared in pain. What did you do about that?
We gave him Dilaudid 4 milligrams and Versed 2 milligrams, and those were both intravenous medications. They were ordered every 15 minutes.
Did the medication have the desired effect on Mr. Cochran's comfort?
Not initially. It was probably after 10 o'clock before he actually started to settle down.
And then according to the notes, what time did Mr. Cochran die?
I think it was just after midnight or around midnight. So it would be, I don't know what the exact time was. It'd be, I don't know if it's 2010 or 2011, but it would be either just before midnight or just after midnight.
Separately, as I understood your testimony earlier, there was nothing anybody could do for Michael Cochran by the time he got to Bowers.
Correct. Our goal was to keep him comfortable.
Your Honor, State would move State 7 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well. It is admitted into evidence.
I didn't see that in the note. State has no further questions, and you're separately.
All right, cross-examination is over.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Epperly.
Good afternoon.
I am Stanley Selden. I'm one of the co-counsel for Natalie Cochran.
Okay.
Ms. Epperly, you're familiar with the procedures in hospice as to admitting a patient, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And part of that admitting procedure is that there are a number of forms to be filled out in guiding the patient, his care in terms of whether he's to be put on life-sustaining equipment or if he's to be resuscitated or things along those lines. Isn't that correct?
It is.
Were you aware that there was both a living will and a medical power of attorney which gave Natalie Cochran the power to decide whether Michael Cochran was to be kept on life-sustaining equipment?
I was not aware initially.
But you found that out later?
Yes.
And you were aware, or eventually became aware, that it was Michael's wish embodied in those documents not to be resuscitated or put on life-sustaining equipment. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Did you catalog or do you recall that Natalie Cochran came in with Michael and also their daughter Nicole?
At 8 o'clock, when I assumed care of Mr. Cochran, Mrs.
Could you speak up just a little
Okay.
bit? I'm having a hard time hearing.
Okay.
Thank you.
When I went in the room at 8 o'clock and assumed care of Mr. Cochran, Mrs. Cochran was at his bedside. There was a younger man and his wife I initially thought was a brother, but came to find out was a friend, and I believe their pastor was there. Just outside the room in the way, it's like a common area. The hospice is divided into 3 different pods with 4 rooms in each pod and a common area that has sofas and TV and that kind of thing.
Okay.
The daughter, with her grandmother, I believe, was there at that time with Mrs. Cochran's mother.
Right. And I believe I recall that you said that even though you were in report, that Mr. Cochran came in about 7:45. Is that correct?
That's the time of the first note.
Okay. And you went on duty and started making notes about 8 o'clock. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, sir.
Okay. Do you recall, and Michael was at hospice for approximately 5 hours before he expired, isn't that right?
Yes,
Do you recall that Natalie Cochran stayed with him the entire 5 hours?
yes,
Were you aware that Michael Cochran, and aware at that time or subsequently learned, he had a constellation of internal physical problems, which included an enlarged heart, a swollen brain with edema or fluid. He had suffered from seizures. He had hypoglycemia, and all of these were in the records that came to you or you reviewed at a later time. Were you aware of that?
I was not. I knew that he had fallen at home, and so the assumption of brain swelling would be reasonable, you know. I wasn't aware of his heart condition. When I went in the room at 8 o'clock, I started care of him, and every 15 minutes I was medicating him. So there was no opportunity when he first came in to read a full medical history. And it was not, a full medical history was not reported to me in report.
Okay. Now, when Michael came in, he was more or less in a comatose state. Isn't that correct?
Yes, he did not respond to any verbal commands to open his eyes or move a particular extremity. His pupils were reactive to light, but that was it.
Were you aware, or did you find out subsequently, that one of his doctors at CAMC had said that, according to the brain scans, he was essentially brain dead at that time?
I knew that the report from CAMC was that he was brain dead, or that he'd had a brain injury and there was no chance of recovery.
Right. And that's why he was at hospice, because your job,
Right.
the person's dying, and you
Right.
try and make them more comfortable.
Correct.
Give me just a moment.
Which is fine.
Thank you. Now, you said that Michael Cochran expired somewhere around midnight.
It was either a little bit before or a little bit after.
And the death certificate, which was filled out around that time,
Okay.
reflects that the time of death was 12:18 a.m. That would correspond with your notes. Is that right?
Yes, that would be, I would accept that as reasonable.
Now, when someone expires at hospice, there is a death certificate filled out, correct?
Yes, yes, there is.
And who would be responsible for that? Would it be Dr. Pitzenbarger, who was the physician on staff?
The nurse, myself, would
Right.
sign it, would fill it out and sign it, and he would then sign it the next day or whenever he came in next.
And the cause of death, according to the death certificate, which was filled out by you, says acute respiratory failure and due to cerebral edema.
Okay.
Respiratory failure means that his lungs failed.
Yes, he stopped breathing, and his heart stopped.
And cerebral edema is a buildup of fluid on the brain.
Correct.
I don't believe I have any more questions. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, redirect Mr. Truman.
He has no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eply. You may
You're welcome.
step down. You are excused.
Okay. Who does this go to?
Yes, if you'll just leave it right there on the shelf. we're
Okay.
good.
All right.
Thank you.